All right there. Hey, data lovers, and welcome to another episode of I Love Data Fridays here at the International Data Evaluation Center on the campuses of The Ohio State University. And folks, welcome to episode 31 of I Love Data Fridays, and we're going to be doing something new today that we call How Do You Do Data? And a little bit more on that in just a second. But hey, who's talking data to you today? Well, you've got me, Jeff Breimer-Bashore, Director of IT and Operations here at the International Data Evaluation Center. And I will be joined shortly in an interview with Amy Smith, teacher leader from Madison County, Kentucky, and Beth Magsig, teacher leader from Fayette County, Kentucky. And they are joining me on the first ever section of I Love Data Fridays that's called How Do You Do Data? Now, a lot of times when teacher leaders come visit me at the I Love Data table at our conferences, I get the question, how are teacher leaders using their data? You know, how are other teacher leaders using it? And that's kind of a hard question for me to answer because not everyone tells me how they're using data. So I thought we'd try to fix that problem a little bit by inviting teacher leaders to come on to I Love Data Fridays and explain how they're using their data. So we'll get right to it with our interview with Amy and Beth. Just a minor warning, we do talk about our favorite Netflix movies that we like binge watching right at the beginning, but right after that, we get right into that data. So enjoy. And we are recording. So Amy and Beth, why don't you guys go ahead and start with introductions?
Okay. I'm Amy Smith, and I'm a teacher leader in Richmond, Kentucky, in Madison County, which is just south of Lexington.
And I'm Beth Moxie, and I am a reading recovery teacher leader in Fayette County Public Schools, which is central Kentucky.
All right. And then, of course, our non-data related question, what movies are you binge watching on Netflix right now?
Well, I just I watched season 6 of House of Cards.
Oh, yes.
Claire Underwood. But I'm also really kind of watching those Hallmark Christmas movies on an endless loop right now.
Okay. Excellent. I had a mix. I'm sorry, Beth. I wasn't sure like if I was gonna like the new season of House of Cards. But you know that feeling when it like ends, like the last episode, and you're like, no. So that I ended up liking it. So
yeah. You wanted it to keep going, or
I wanted to keep going. Like it was like it stopped too soon. I was like, no. No.
Well, it's funny. I didn't know that was the end. Somehow I missed that memo.
Oh.
I just watched it and thought, ooh, I wonder how they're going to work this out. And I read an article later on salon.com that said, what'd you think about the finale? My thought was, no, oh my God. So
that's what I was like. So I'm Beth. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off there. What was...
No, I not just finished, but a couple weeks ago finished The Haunting of Hill House, which was amazing and scary, but such a good story. And then
which one?
Well, I'm just saying I need to start watching. I'm behind on Riverdale, so I need to get started back on that. Yeah, so I need to finish that season off from last season and get caught up on this season. So.
I don't know Riverdale. What's that one?
Oh no! Listen, Jeff.
It's based on the Archie comics.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know. It's mindless and just it's good.
It's Beth and I sort of have that. We love dark humor and we love those sort of. I mean, Haunting the Hill House was terrifying. You scared me to death with that. Yeah. She sucked me into that, made me watch it. But
I was like, just power through the first episode. You can do it.
Yeah. So. We both love Riverdale and American Horror Story.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, both of us love that. We just finished that one.
The season just ended. So it started off really strong, then kind of got a little meh in the middle, but it ended on a really kind of interesting note.
And a little reading recovery trivia, Jim Schnug is also a big American Horror Story fan.
Oh, okay. I'll have to make sure to ask him about that. Okay. All right. So let's talk some data here. First of all, I want to welcome you both to the very first sort of episode of, how do you do data? And I'm glad you guys agreed to do this. And I'm going to start with my version of the backstory. And then Amy and Beth, I wonder if you can give me the real backstory behind all of this. So like from my perspective, one day, and I think it was in the fall, Amy, maybe August or September, like my phone starts to blow up with text messages. And like, you know, I'm reading them and like, Amy's like all excited about it and everything, something. And I'm reading through and she's telling me about like the, you know, initially how you guys went, you know, we're looking at reports and kind of, you know, finding trends, but then how you ultimately sort of came up with like, you know, some action plans or things or that you wanted to review for your teachers and to work on with your teachers. And then ultimately this year you were like able to actually see the difference that all of this stuff or this work and investigation and data made in your data actually with this year. So why don't you guys then now give me the real backstory and everything.
Okay, well, I don't remember the piece about blowing up your phone. It sounded pretty accurate. Beth and I are our district's neighbor one another, so we work together all the time. And the teacher leader who was here before Beth and then was Beth's partner, who's since retired, Vicki Hall, she and I work together a lot too. We trained together many years ago, so we've always had this partnership, which is really, really important for a teacher leader because you're often all by yourself and nobody else really knows what you do. So I want to start with that. Mm-hmm. It's really important for teacher leaders to find someone in network and do that. And it can be tough, but we started to really it was the summer of 2016. And we the way it works in Kentucky, because our UTC has to have their site report written basically at the very 1st of July. Mm-hmm. So under a time crunch to get our data in every year. And the deadline is typically before you go to TLI, which is like June 12th, 15th, something. Yeah. So it's a mad dash from the last day of school to getting that data approved and writing up our site report, which very often leaves you with very little time to reflect on the data. Yeah. I tell you this backstory because for years and years and years, that's how it went. And we would try to make a plan, but it never was a very firmed up plan because then you do it, you turn it in, and you go on vacation for 6 weeks, you know? Yeah. What happened in 2016 was we did all that and put it away, but then the TLI, because it was in Vancouver, it wasn't until the middle part of July. Yeah. So we put it away and we thought about it, but then we went on vacation. But when we got to Vancouver, we went to Mary Freed's session where she was reviewing the complexity study, the RRQ article. Yeah. And Beth and I had seen this trend when we talked about our data initially. We were like, man, our discontinuation rates, both of our sites, is very high overall, but we kept seeing all these kids that seemed to just get hung, like 7, 8, 9, the mid-processing range, and we were trying to understand that problem. Well, Mary Freed in her session really talked about that complexity study, and she described those kids like the close enough kids. So we came back then and we got back into the data and found those kids, and we formulated a plan. And we spent the entire year really working on that complexity study, and shout out to Jeff Williams. We started the year with his article, Bringing Your A Game. Happened at the end of that year, we were mystified that our data didn't change. Like there was no discernible improvement, right?
Right, yeah. The discontinue rate was pretty much the same. You know, we were almost disappointed in a way.
Both of us. Yeah. And because it was still very high, it didn't go down on any measure, but we couldn't see the change there. So the next year, we got the data again. We sort of saw the same trends, although a little less of those kids. It was a little more cut and dry, right? They either made it across or they were very low.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe that is a change. But Beth pulled out those on-demand reports you made with the total score. And she also, we had just gotten a new book, so we were sort of obsessed with chapter 7 in that book as a place to start. And so what we found on this was some of our teachers, you can see that start, you know, they're reading recovery kids are significantly higher than the average of our site, their growth was less.
So I'm going to interrupt Amy for a second here and talk about and explain these charts real quick. So on here, you are looking at versions of an on-demand report on our website that is called the OS Total Scores by School Report. There are 2 different years shown on this slide. There's a year from one of the charts is for 2016-17, and the other chart is for 2017-18. The charts, and we'll go back up to 2016-17, show growth from the start of the school year, so the bottom of the bars are where schools are starting at the beginning of the school year, to the top of each bar where schools are finishing at the end of the school year. So there's 1 bar for each school in your site shown on this chart. The bars are ordered from left to right, from least amount of growth to most amount of growth. Now, the dashed lines show you what happened nationally, and this is for full program children. The bottom dashed line tells us where nationally full program children start at the beginning of the year. The top dashed line tells us where they finish at the end of the school year. And Amy was saying that maybe one of their focuses was going to be on schools where, like maybe these schools up here in 16-17, where they're starting higher than the national average, but they do not make as much accelerated growth, and they fail to get up to average levels by the end of the school year. All right, I'm going to turn it back over.
And so we thought this is another way to help the teachers understand the problem and help us understand the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have anything you want to say about that one? Okay, so last year we started the year with the idea of bringing back what we'd done the previous year, but this is a new way to conceptualize the problem. At the teacher by teacher level, which is growth. And this data, this chart, Jeff, really made an impact.
Yeah.
And what we saw then at the end of last year, my discontinuation rate did go up maybe like 3 or 4 points. Mm-hmm. But the bigger change, the shift that we wanted to go for, that was the one we had hoped for, was the closing the gap with text reading.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about this one.
Yeah, so back in 2015-16, our discontinue rate, hit the wrong thing. Our discontinue rate was great. We were super happy, but if we just stopped and didn't really look any deeper, you could see, like when we looked at comparing ourselves to the national random sample, like the gap was still big between.
Yeah.
You can't just sit and rest on our high discontinue rate. And so, this is the year that we did the action chains and that sort of thing. Well, then last year or the year before, you could see we got a little bit closer at mid-year, but the gap was still pretty wide at the end of the year.
So that's the left-hand chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then on the right side was where we were last year, and it's the closest we've ever been in many, many, many years. So I was really pleased, and I felt like that's, even though it's taken several years, like we're starting to see the payoff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And on ours, our gap was actually larger than Fayette County's in 15-16, is particularly at the end of the year, and we closed it on both fronts. And actually, our teachers last year passed them at mid-year, and they were just below at the year end. So what we're saying is, we felt like it took us 2 years and lots of ways of explaining the data and understanding it to make this shift, which was important.
Yeah. We just wanted to we had to move beyond just that kind of simplistic, okay, our discontinuation rate is this. Our, second round discontinue was this. And so we had to just kind of get beyond that and really start looking for reasons, or for possible reasons, for why our data is showing us what it's showing us.
So you're showing this figure 5.1 to your teachers on an annual basis to kind of start the conversation with them.
Yeah, we really just did that to show the journey, really.
Yeah. Okay.
And so when we got our data, and you're actually looking at the PowerPoint from our August PD, Beth and I did that together. This is her data, but ours is on Madison. So this is actually the things that they saw. Because we just took them back through. Remember when we did this, and remember this is where we're going, because the day that I did kind of blow up your phone, it, it was in part, but it's because we found a new problem in our data, which sounds like it would be a bad thing, but it was so cool.
No, I think that's great. Yeah. I mean, that's what we are hoping with the data, that it's not only revealing the quote unquote good, but also the not so good. And now you can start to fix it.
Well, so here's what happened. We felt pretty smug about, we accomplished a lot. We were like, yay, we did it. Our teachers did it. We're so proud. Until we looked at the incomplete over years.
I want to interrupt Amy again real quick and explain this chart before we get into the real meat of our discussion about this. If you look at this chart is comparing three types of students, or three groups of students. If you look along the left-hand side, the very first row are data for first-round discontinued students. Then we have data for second-round discontinued students. And then finally, the last row are data for the incomplete students. And for each student, we look at the number of weeks. That's the first column there going across the top. Their entry text level, their end-of-year text level, the gain that they make on those text levels, and then actually we're also looking at the amount of gain per week on their text levels. So some data is data that we don't collect, but it looks like they collected themselves.
Yeah, it had pretty much stayed the same, like the percentage of kids who were incomplete at the end of the year. So we were like, well, yeah, it's got to be because they're holding on to those first round kids for way too long. That was our initial gut reaction, was like, oh, this has got to be the reason.
Simple problem.
Yeah, simple problem. So then we're like, okay, well, let's see if that's the case. And so what we really found out, at least in Fayette County, and what's kind of interesting is that Amy's data is always within, our data is so similar that it's kind of really
weird.
It is weird. But anyway, so what we actually found is that when we looked at our second round discontinued versus our incomplete kids, they're pretty much getting the same amount of weeks in program. And then it's not on this chart, but one of my teachers in the opening meeting asked, well, is it possible that the second round discontinued kids are getting more lessons than the incomplete kids? Maybe there's more interruptions to the program. And what I actually found is that the incomplete kids on average got more lessons than the second round discontinued kids as well. That wasn't the answer to our problem.
Yeah.
We're not saying that efficiency of the first round doesn't play a role. It does.
But in this case, it didn't. Yeah, no, I can see that. Because that 18 and a half weeks is pretty much the national average for what usually first round discontinued kids get out at.
And we did have a training class last year. And, a lot of times the trainees want to hold their kids the full 20 weeks sometimes. And so that does play a role into that as well. But so we were like, well, so that's not really what's happening. So we decided to dig a little deeper.
And I think the thing that we started doing, and for the record, this was a conversation Beth and I had over many weeks. And I think that was pretty powerful because we allowed ourselves, instead of, okay, let's set up time to meet and let's do this, we really just allowed ourselves. I remember one day, a planning day, we talked for 3 hours. We just talked, and we kept pulling data up and talking about it. And
what about this?
Yeah, what do you think about that? And comparing, and teacher leaders don't give themselves time to do that.
And what I do love about this is we'll be sitting there, and Amy and I we work a lot, but it's we'll be randomly texting each other what about this? And it'll be 2 weeks after, so it's we're always thinking and processing and trying to figure things out. We're never satisfied with with one solution.
If you look at this data, what was really interesting to us, we knew the incomplete kids were the target group, what is happening, why. So I pulled that chart. What's the one, Jeff, where it has every teacher and all of the data, kid by kid, student data summary? Is that
the student data summary.
Yes.
Yep.
That was the report that gave us the crucial information that led us to this. By the way, I want you to get massive credit for all those reports because they're all wonderful.
Good. So I'm going to break in here again and talk about the report that Amy just mentioned, the student data summary, which is another on-demand report that you can find on the IDEC website. And on the example here that I'm showing, and I've got the names of the children and teachers and schools blurred out here in this example. But basically, it shows a list of all of your students for each teacher and school in your school district and gives you some basic summary information. If you look here at this first row, we can see that we have a reading recovery child who got 63 lessons in 20 weeks, missed 21 lessons, had about 3 lessons per week, and then we can see their text reading level at fall, entry, exit, and year end, and then finally their end of program status here. So Amy's going to describe how she used this particular report. So what did it reveal, I guess?
Okay. So we knew incomplete was the problem, or that was the target. So I went through that and looked up every incomplete kid, and I started seeing this pattern. Entry 3, exit 8. Entry 3, exit 8. 3, 8, 3, 8, over and over and over. And that was exactly the data that we had used 3 years prior, because we kept seeing entry 1, exit 8. Entry 1, exit 9. Entry 1, exit 8 for our recommended kids.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm like, is this real right now? So of course I texted Beth and said, pull your data summary and look and see. And she saw that pattern over and over. So then we found the table, I think it's S25 or something, way, way, way down, where you give us that data for the second round discontinued kids. What we found was Beth's is a little bigger than mine as far as the difference in entry, but mine, I think, was entry was 3.2 and exit was 4.7. I'm like, man, that seemed like much. And then when you look at the growth, the acceleration and the exit, you go, how is this happening? Look at the difference in, I mean, if you come in at a 5 in Fayette County, your chances are good at, going out to 18 after 11 weeks. If you're at a 3, the chances are good you're going to get stuck at about a 9. Why in the world was that happening? And I shout out to Betsy K, who looked at on the bus with me in California, and she said, this is interesting. Always remember an average only tells you a piece of it. And that is true. She said, go back and look kid by kid by kid. What I realized is, for the most part, we had done that. And this pattern is very, very fixed with our incomplete kids. It repeats over and over and over. So we also then started looking at your other subtests to figure out, other task, OS tasks, to figure out, was there anything else that also showed this same pattern?
So you saying you went to the OS totals, the OS scores by school, but looked at different tasks of the OS then on that chart? Okay.
Yeah, we pulled it from the data down.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I did not pull it from the data that Beth did, because she is way better at that than I am. So we were trying to find, and we really found almost the exact same pattern, especially in writing vocabulary.
Yeah, I mean, even though, like, for our second round discontinued versus the incomplete, I mean, it's about 8-ish words, but when you look at the difference between what they're coming out, 52 versus 39, they were like, well, that's interesting. So then we also then looked at the comparison on the Ohio word test. And so we thought that was interesting too. And something that we also looked at, which I'm going to have to pull it from down here, is that we also looked at the percentiles. Do you remember that, Amy? And so we thought, well, the numbers are one thing, but sometimes, we pulled up the, what is it called? The
U.S. norms.
The U.S. norms or percentile ranks and that sort of thing. And so we just kind of looked at those as well. And if you look, the 23rd percentile for the Ohio word test for entry is 12.6, which is the 23rd percentile, versus the Ohio word test kids incomplete at 7.6 is the 7th percentile. So we looked at it in a different way too, just because we felt like percentiles, it makes it more tangible, I guess, in a sense. So you can just see, the numbers are one thing and the stanines tell you another thing, but the percentiles really kind of made it more drastic. You can see the difference between I mean, 7th percentile versus the discontinued or not discontinued kids, the 7th percentile, and then writing vocabulary. You can just see the difference there. 18 percentile for second round discontinued coming in, and then they're leaving at the 44th percentile, which is falls in that average band. So
go back to the text reading. So we're like, what does it mean? And you were very patient with us and talked several times about the data. We would be remiss if we didn't call out Lindy Harmon, our trainer, who talked to us many times about the data, very tentative way. She was intrigued by this pattern. And then once we figure out what it means, what on earth do we do with this for teachers? Like, how do we adjust it or what we do for them? And this is where it started. We kind of looked at it as, look at the text level gain per week. This is not a rule. And I think sometimes we're very cautious about talking about even levels or growth because we're afraid it sounds too much like a rule.
Yeah.
But in my site, you see Beth's first round, it was one level per week for the first round and 1.1 for the second round versus 0.5.
Yeah.
So that was one thing where we were like, okay, that's something specific that gives teachers sort of a way to
goal to shoot for. Yeah.
And so we just decided we were going to get really clear with them about, it's not about a level, but it is about acceleration. You know, this is what acceleration looks like in our site. That was really important. So that was one thing we knew we wanted to get at. And the content we used to sort of frame that was the CPRE report chapter on deliberate and dexterous teachers. And the types of decisions that are being made, the types of sort of characteristics of teachers, and how that relates to acceleration overall. The kinds of thinking that teachers who get massive acceleration do. So that's how we frame that. But the other thing that we did was we kept going back to this, what is happening for these kids who come in at this text level range, probably like really in our site, 0 to 3 overall. What's happening early in their programs, and that is allowing them to,
to accelerate.
Yeah. And create that, assemble that little working system. And it was Betsy and Nancy's article on monitoring, finding versus fixing that we had used last year with a training class that we thought, wow, this really puts into real clear terminology the idea of the monitoring system versus the solving system, or not versus, but side by side. So we focused on that as the starting point for our teachers.
Yeah. And so we found a lot of our teachers, and myself included early on, is that I didn't really understand the difference between finding and fixing. Kids had to be able to know that they've made an error before you can begin to teach them to how to fix it. And so a lot of teachers were teaching it, which the article beautifully explains, is a lot of people are teaching those two systems together. And then when you do them both at the same time, the finding and the fixing together, then both of them are very fragile. And so we thought, well, that's something that we've got to get clear about, especially early on in program.
And so we basically, using that as a starting point, have allowed our teachers to spend the entire fall exploring sort of the subcomponents of a fully assembled literacy processing system, and starting with monitoring. And then we went back to another article from TWU, Connie and Nancy, the reciprocity, and then we pulled in Leslie, Jim, and Cherie's article on
uncovering what's under the white tape.
Problem solving and
writing. On writing.
And the problem solving system, especially early monitoring and taking action there.
Because we found a lot of our teachers are, once they kind of understood the whole finding, fixing, and reading, we weren't necessarily seeing that payoff in the writing. It was like all of a sudden it was all about accuracy in the writing, and the teachers are jumping in and monitoring for the children and that sort of thing. And so we spent quite a bit of time also talking about monitoring and writing in October.
And here's where, Jeff, coming back to you, because I know you're probably tuned out because of the specifics.
No,
but here's how it matters.
I have a question when you're done. I have a question.
But here's how it matters for your data, okay? I mean, for your understanding of this data.
Yeah.
We saw this correlation, or something with writing vocabulary having, and early text levels having an impact on success or not. We know that from, the study, I can't remember, and change over time.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm sure that, sorry, Lindy. But I do know where it is in the book. But is all of the content that we just talked about bringing in, and we did that in August, September, October, November, right? Yeah. Lends itself to an understanding of teaching kids how to take these actions, how to evaluate their actions, how to take additional actions, and really keeps in balance reading and writing as two sides of the system, and how to get everything consolidated early that they need to consolidate so that they can use those things early to take independent action, even like subroutines that are very, very basic, such as monitoring your own space, leaving space, or initiating
when
action.
They don't know. Yeah. Like if I don't know how to write a word, I'm going to move my hand up to the work page, and then my teacher will help me. Like just even something simple as that, like getting that completely under control.
So our teachers have really focused on all of that, those early, things that you can observe, and they're just behaviors, and taking them all the way to the point of consolidation from the beginning, so that kids can use those, because we felt like there was something in these text levels that was showing us it's what's happening early, which we know. We know.
Yeah.
Jeffrey says it all the time. Yeah.
All right. So
go ahead.
So let me ask this. I'm kind of gonna go back here, and then I'm gonna come to this conversation. So, so a lot of your actions and strategies that you've employed here, this is not something you guys figured out in one day, like you were saying. You may have had a day where you guys had time together, but it's something that sort of it came organically over the course of weeks, possibly a month or two, if that's what I was on, or even longer.
Yeah, I mean, we still talk about it.
Yeah, we do. I would say the original, to get from understanding or seeing the problem initially in our data to what you're seeing in front of you, which was the August teacher PD we did with probably a month of discussions, including lots of them on text and email, but then two together, right?
Yeah,
two full days together.
Just trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah. So
like a plan, which is really hard.
Yeah. So a lot of times when I talk to teacher leaders at like the Teacher Leader Institute, sometimes there's this expectation that when they look at the numbers instantly right there in that moment will reveal the problem and the solution without, that they just reveal themselves right there. And a lot of times I have trouble telling people is that I don't think they reveal themselves instantly, that it takes this sort of longer process of sometimes it does. Sometimes it reveals something you're like, oh, well, we can fix that. But in this case, it sounds like you knew where there was a problem. You kind of had to really hunt for the problem first. It was there, and it can be seen. And then with these steps, what you were talking about with the various articles, it seems like the various articles addressed issues that those fundamental tasks that the kids need to learn early on is what was preventing them from getting past like that text level 8 or 9, that unless they have those skills, they can't really break through that barrier at the text level 9. Do I have that kind of right?
Well, and I think what Beth said about each subsystem of the working whole being sort of fragile. So it's not that with support, they didn't have those air quote skills. It's that we hadn't focused maybe hard enough early on getting, really identifying clearly for our teachers and helping them explore all the things that kids have to take from 0 to 100% that they control.
Without teacher support.
Yeah. And making that a focus, like fast, early. This is something that's your job now, and being really intentional about that. But I want to say something else, Jeff. There's something that we left out. I think that's also important.
Yeah.
We are still asking ourselves questions about this data right now. And every month we've tried to find a way for our teachers to bring this problem back into focus to understand it more. So the thing that we came up with this year that's probably the best thing we've done is what we call the average child study. And it is a mechanism for teachers to step back from the reading recovery kids, allow them to participate in unassisted tasks on a regular schedule, which is once a month, and then compare the types of behaviors and the solving and the monitoring that they're seeing with an average kid. So the week before continuing contact, they each do an unassisted writing, an unassisted running record reading task with one of the reading recovery kids. Most of ours have chosen to do all four.
Because they've learned so much about it. It really gave them a way to step back and observe what kids can do when the teacher completely removes herself from the support. And so they really have taken it on. And I will say that this month has probably been one of the most exciting because, early on in August, or in August when we, or September when we had our first meeting, the gap between the average child and the reading recovery child seemed almost insurmountable. That last month, there were so many of my teachers where the gap has closed. And there's lots of instances where the reading recovery children were actually more strategic than some of the average children in the classroom. So it's been really kind of exciting to see it in reading and in writing. So all the things that, we talked about, monitoring, confirming, like all those different pieces of the system that we've talked about are coming together. And it really has given them a tool just to step back and see, are the things that I've been teaching, are they becoming more consolidated? And where are they? Is it about 80%? Is it about 70% known? Like, being able to figure those things out. And then it gives them a very clear path about what to do next with children.
And what we did not put any parameters on it. Like, we did not make it a college assignment. They don't have to write anything. They don't have to, what they do is they have to do it and they bring it every time. And we have time in continuing PD where they just discuss it and we generate sort of these hypotheses about why and how and what's happening.
What did you do?
Yeah. And they love it. They really love it. But if you think about it, it's pulling them back into real-time observation of groups of kids, like data. And, and it's not, none of these ideas we're telling you are ours. They've all come from something we've learned. We are pulling things together, like the average child study. We're pulling things together that we felt like would support exploration of this data, on a real-time way. Because the other thing, what we felt like we didn't do great the last 2 years was we sort of set the expectation, and then we did all this stuff, and we waited till the end of the year to see if it was working when we got our data. We didn't want to do that this year. So the last thing we did was Beth did. I did not know how to do it. She did it. Was set up an online space for our teachers.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Record. Let's talk about this now, because this is, I think, the big difference too. I told you one of the things is we're trying to still understand the problem. This is allowing us to see where our teachers' kids are every week and have a way to communicate. So Beth, go ahead and talk about this.
So this form has kind of evolved over time. Like, we keep tinkering with it a little bit. I'll do the blank one, and then I can pull up one that's complete. Because some of my teachers haven't made the shift over to this new one. And so basically what teachers do is they fill this form out. They complete the data piece every single week, and then we check it. I try to do it every week, but sometimes it might be a week and a half, 2 weeks before I can check it. But basically what it does is it just shows us,
Beth, can I ask one question real quick?
Yeah.
And this is just more for like the audience watching. So this is a Google spreadsheet or Google Sheets form that you put online, then you share with your
Yeah, so this very first, I created a space in the My Drive portion of Google Drive.
Yeah.
Each school has a folder, and then within each folder, here, I'll just show you this one. Within each folder, each teacher has a folder.
Gotcha.
And so then they go into, and the whole folder is actually shared with, in this case, all 3 teachers have access to this whole folder. And then they just go in every single week and complete. Yeah, and so it's just a way for us just to check in. And so they enter in their data, and you can see it has, level, and then the accuracy rate and the self-correction ratio. And then so we can just check in on those different things.
So what does the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday column indicate? That they got a lesson that day?
Yeah, the lessons. So they can just put in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that sort of thing. Or if you look underneath over here where it talks about codes.
Okay.
Then that's where they put those in. And what Amy actually figured out, so you say you don't give yourself credit, but you did do this. She made it to where, like, if, whoops, sorry, I was in the wrong one. But like here, if the child is absent, it will color code it. But then she also made it so that it calculates the numbers down over here.
Amy, you did all of that?
She did.
I did. I know.
Isn't that awesome? So proud of her.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I do on Friday nights.
Right. But the teachers were like, when I showed them this, because we just made these changes this month, they were like, whoa. Yeah. They were super impressed.
You guys are amazing.
I know. We're like, thanks. We're pretty cool.
This is the thing that's crazy, though. There are, I know I sent this to Jeff Williams, and he is taking it, and he's made some changes for his group. And I know Meg in Wisconsin, she did something, and we've shared back and forth. I think there's such good things going on out there in the United States and also Canada with how teacher leaders are doing data and using data. We just don't get to talk to each other very much. So if anyone's listening to this and is thinking to yourself, yeah, we did that 2 years ago, that's awesome. I mean, you probably did. I hope this can become something we do more frequently, where we'll get to know what Cindy in Missouri is doing or Meg in Wisconsin.
Yeah, we just really wanted to give our teachers and us, really our teachers, a one-pager where whenever they do go in to enter in their IDEC data, that they have all that in one place. So it's not a lot of shuffling of papers, and then which could lead to incorrect data entry.
Yeah.
So here's another thing about this that I think is important. It is one thing to look back at old data and make assertions about it. That is one kind of, inquiry. What this allows us to do now is, because there's a comment function up here, we can constantly check in and have an ongoing dialogue with our teachers in this space. Oh,
yes. Yeah.
And it's maintained and archived. So we know, have I mentioned this? Have I checked in on this kid? And it's all archived. And this gives us the ability, like we're just coming off Carnegie, to try some things, first of all, to understand the problem here, to make some hypotheses, to suggest some changes, and watch and see in real time very quickly if those things are helping. I know Beth and I have both done lots of visits already based upon this.
Yeah, because the way we used to keep this data was they would bring a copy of this form that was just in like Excel or document, honestly, and they would just bring a copy of it, and then we would have it, and it would be a month before we could check in again. And so sometimes it just was, I would look at it and be like emailing teachers, hey, do you want to visit or whatever, but it wasn't, didn't feel timely enough, I guess.
Yeah. No, this is great. So, do your teachers is there any complaints about having to enter too much data, or are they finding the feedback or information valuable enough that it's...
Well, no one's complained to my face.
Yeah. So. I do feel like there are some grumblings, but no.
No, for the most part, I mean, I think they've just kind of gotten into the routine of doing it. At the beginning of the year, it was kind of more, like this top part, like someone would forget to put in some of this information up at the top, that sort of thing. And it was more comments about that. But now that they're kind of into it and they are getting feedback, like, for example, if the self-correction ratio is like 1 to 0, 1 to 6, something like that, I might make a comment and be like, is there a potential monitoring issue? And then that'll lead to them, scanning of something to me where I can look at it and we'll have conversations about it. But who's all the accuracy rates are like 98, 99, 96, that sort of thing. It just gives you information.
Right. So let me ask this, and let me see if I'm sort of summing it up right here. So, I mean, this form is wonderful because, as you were saying in the beginning, that, instead of waiting weeks to talk about issues or problems with children and their progress, you guys are seeing it at times, sometimes on a daily basis, where you know they're, and so and now you can do almost an immediate feedback on to the teachers when something doesn't look right to your eyes, and you can and then talk about and use these things that kind of coach the teachers on the things that you were talking about earlier, what's going on with the monitoring or stuff like that.
And let me give you a perfect example of an unintended consequence that's a positive one.
Okay.
One of our very first understanding of the problem was that first round takes too long. And we have said that's not completely true, but it's still a factor. So I've been looking at these, and I know Beth has too, noticing kids who are taking off and who are far now, or, are above an average level for their class. And so I started asking questions several weeks ago for some of these kids who it was clear were just off the charts, accelerating. There was one who started at a 0 and was at a 10 by our October meeting.
Wow.
For heaven's sakes, right.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing good things, but it also allowed me to open a dialogue about, okay, so let's start talking about this kid's problem-solving system in terms of being strong enough to transition back to the classroom. And just last week, I put a comment on there, and one of my teachers came to me and said, wow, I forgot about some of these things in chapter 7 about the procedures, the protocol for discontinuation, which she described should start well in advance of the end. Yeah, and it allowed us then to say, okay, our teachers need a little bit more support on really thinking about discontinuation as a process that occurs over a significant amount of time. And this is a great teacher who has high outcomes, but they often think of discontinuation as an end point instead of a process that starts to occur. So we drafted this on Friday for them to help them.
Just as a reminder.
Yeah, as a reminder. But had I not been having that conversation, Jeff, it occurred to me that this is an issue, that this is something they needed support with, because we started the year with that chapter last year. So you think, oh, well, they know that. Well, in real time, though, it gets muddy. It's muddy to enact all this stuff in real time.
Yeah. What I liked about it too is down here, it gives you kind of like these guiding questions and that sort of thing. But what I love what they added at the end, which Amy and her teacher completely did all this, very specific, like have you done these things, decisions and or notes. And so then it gives you just a way of keeping track.
Oh, I love this. This is like it's almost like it's a checklist of things to do. Yeah.
And then that can then go, that can be shared with the classroom teacher. It doesn't have to be a paper copy, and then that can go in the Google Drive, the school's drive, for that teacher. And then you have, not proof isn't the right word, but you have documentation.
Yeah.
And to make that transition smooth for that child.
Because we're always very concerned about kids falling apart. Like if you go back to the very top, the quote I started with was the one from Change Over Time, which, they're ready when they have reading and writing competencies that they are unlikely to lose. And so I think there's something very valuable for us at being we've been intentional about everything all year. I think our teachers have more intentional. Now this is, how are we going to be so intentional about this transition period over several weeks? And I did not make any of this up. I've tried to quote specifically from Clay. But that chapter, as it's written, is very dense. There are some sentences that literally have 3 sentences worth of meaning. But again, it's because of the data and the process Beth set up that I even knew this was something we should do.
Oh, okay.
I'll share that with you, Jeff. I'll share that document with you if you want it.
Yeah. Good. What else? Anything else? Or, I don't mean to say it like that. This is...
Well.
Oh gosh, what did I just get myself into?
No.
You never know.
I think as far as what else is what's now. Oh, well, what we're going to do in December.
Oh yeah, we're bringing back, a few years ago, we talked about the complexity in action chains, out of the Freed study, and then the Bringing Our A Game article by Jeff Williams. We're coming back to look at the complexity in solving, like, are kids making multiple attempts at words? Are they, using multiple sources of information in those attempts? And so using that, coming back to that again, reviewing that, and then giving them time to look at their average child and the reading recovery child, to be looking for evidence of that, to help put it into, it's one thing just to say, this is a typical action chain, but until they see it and experience it with their own children, I think it'll help make it more meaningful.
Yeah.
Back to that in December.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it's gonna sort of come full circle over a 3-year period of time. I think we have to be very mindful about how hard it is. Some of these things are, it's a very complicated learning. And so Beth and I have had to allow ourselves to stick to a more coherent focus. Would you say that?
Oh, yes.
And let some other things go, which teacher leaders are not great at. We want to make sure everything is solid. But I think what we've done well, particularly in the last 2 years, is we've taken the piece of the problem that we felt like was the big ticket item, and we have just brought it back over and over. Oh, show them the reflection thing. Another way we're using data, and we have always been pretty good about getting reflections from our teachers. Other thing we're doing, because qualitative data is very, very important to our understanding as far as our teachers learning. So at the end of every continuing contact, we have them reflect upon their learning, but we pull it back to that original framework of deliberate and dexterous teaching.
Out of the CPRE report.
Yeah. And basically the question is, based upon the content that we've studied today and the lessons you've observed and the discussion, how would you apply that when you go back to school in the next 3 weeks to you being more deliberate and more dexterous? That's the reflection question over and over. And we were collecting that data and reading it and thinking, what do their reflections show us about how much or how they understood the content? So Beth does this. Talk about this. I don't even know what you're saying.
So there's a way that you can create a QR code that links to a Google form.
Yeah.
So they just open up their camera app, aim it at the PowerPoint, or aim it at the QR code on their in their PowerPoint handouts, and then it opens up to this Google form, and then it's just a question. If I can figure out how to get back to it. It's just basically to now, between now and the next time that you come.
Oh, wait a minute. Put up your QR code again. I was going to do it on my phone.
Okay.
Sorry, folks listening.
There you go. Sorry. So if you aim it at it, it's just a one question.
Yeah, it's working on it here. Let's see. I'll read it.
And they do this before they walk out
the door. Yeah. And so then what it does is they put in their email as well, because that way they get a response back, a copy of what they said, because sometimes they would kind of be like, I don't remember what I said. But actually you have an email. So
yeah. So it says, reflect upon the totality of today's reading. What's BTM stand for?
Behind the mirror. Behind
the mirror lessons and discussions. Think about how these inform your understanding of what being deliberate and dexterous looks like in practice. Give some examples of what you intentionally do between OPL lessons to be deliberate and dexterous. Yeah, that worked real good. I was able to.
So yeah, it's something, I didn't come up with that. I went to a training this summer and they used it, so I just stole it from that.
Heck yeah, when someone has like a good idea. You're like,
right, is a way to just not have to keep shuffling papers. And so then what happens is that you go into that once you create the form, you can make it to where it will create a Google Sheet.
Yeah.
And it just creates it every single time. So it's not like something you have to create every single time. It'll automatically add everybody's responses. And so then we have a way of seeing what teachers are thinking about, what was their big takeaway.
And then you guys sit down with a glass of wine and read through all this. And
right. Yeah, we do.
But it's another way for us to keep coming back to our theme, which is being deliberate and dexterous and thinking about how these different things that we've been working on fit together. And it gives them something explicitly to try back in their lessons. And then when they come back the following month, we bring it back out and we talk about it and give them time to reflect together about what'd you do, what'd you learn.
Yeah. So let me ask you guys this. I'm kind of relating this to like a coach on a sports team. Like, so the high school coach on our high school girls cross country team, you know, the girls have been making this like big improvement, and it, you know, just like with you guys, it's been years to take, and he's been constantly telling the girls to, like, you know, trust the process. Like, you know, you may not understand why you're doing this type of workout for today, but trust me, I am building you into a better runner. So it seems like at times, did you have to take your teachers aside or like tell them, listen, let's trust the process here, and we're going to see in we may not see it tomorrow, but 2 years down the road, we may see the impact, or we will see the impact. Is that what it's kind of been like for you guys, or?
Well, but here, I'm going to say no and yes. The no is only because I think we thought we'd get this accomplished in about 6 months. I don't think so, because Beth and I really like get fired up and we're like, we're going to make this happen. And we were stunned when it didn't happen right away.
What happened? Whoa!
So we would have had to know that was going to happen to pull anybody aside. But I think what we have done that is similar to that. And if you noticed, I think I sent you the full PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Walked them through the last 2 years to this point, and we talked very honestly with them about things we tried that we felt like worked and things we tried that didn't get the shift, and we gave them some agency right away about what kinds of things you think would be helpful. And just going back, that average child study, we told them right away, you guys, we're going to try this, but we are firmly committed to dropping it, changing it in any way, because it's important that the system has your input and works in a way that, you feel some ownership of. So, but at the very same time, by keeping this data, by keeping up with the data, Beth and I together, by checking in with them, we're able to do what I think you were describing, which is coach on an individual level all the time in an ongoing way. And that's really tough to do when you have Beth's 60-something teachers here in Fayette County. So that's really hard. So I would say yes on that.
Okay.
Yeah. And, I think the other thing is, one of the slides in that PowerPoint, we show the big picture and we show the trends, but then we get down to it and say, but you guys, data and reading recovery doesn't change on an average level. It can only be changed at a teacher level. And we showed that report. I'm so sorry, I don't know the names of them, Jeff. Yeah, I think it's that one. No. The teacher one. Where is it?
This one right here.
This is the teacher data comparison sheet. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to interrupt Amy and Beth once again here just to quickly describe the teacher data comparison sheet that they were talking about. There's a sample here on my screen, and this is another on-demand report that you can see on our website. And essentially, the teacher data comparison sheet, our website makes one sheet for each of your teachers, and it compares some statistics. So it looks at the discontinuation rate for full program students, discontinuation for all students, the growth of your discontinued students compared to the average first grader, that's the random sample, the growth of your recommended students compared to the average first grader, a 5-year discontinuation rate, for full program students, a 5-year discontinuation rate for all students. It also looks at the percentage of children who are recommended after 20 weeks, the percentage of children who had incomplete programs, the average number of weeks that were required to discontinue your first round students, the percentage of kids that were none of above. Let's see, the number of lessons missed because the child was absent, lessons missed because the child was unavailable, lessons missed because the teacher was absent, and lessons missed because the teacher was unavailable. and it gives you that data for three different scenarios. One, you get to see the teachers' averages on all of this data. So that's this column right here. And then we get to compare it to your site average. So the teacher can compare her data to the site data. And then finally, there's a national average. So the teacher can compare herself to what's happening nationally. All right, let's get back to Amy and Beth.
So we gave them each those, and we had them sort of, reflect on it. And we talked about good things and what each thing meant. And we put that directive to them. We ended it with, all of these things are our patterns. Here are the things we're going to do to work on this together. But ultimately, it's at a teacher level, that a child level, that this data changes. I think we're doing a much better job of coaching. We've changed up some things with our teacher visits, frequency when we do those, and we're just allowing ourselves more flexibility. I think we're being more responsive to our individual teachers now.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So, I just feel more in touch with them, I guess, is what really is the most important thing.
And every now and then they'll hide a child from you because
Right.
they're afraid they've done something wrong, or they don't want to, they keep thinking, oh, I can fix it. I can work this out. And that's instinctive.
Yeah.
They can't do it now. And we're not doing this we did not do this from a
Punitive.
big brother punitive accountability thing.
Yeah.
Support perspective.
How can we help?
So really, Jeff, we walked you through, you can see I don't even know how many types of data we've described, but the big thing that I think Beth and I have learned is not one single piece of this data is the answer or the, reveals the problem. It's all of it collectively and changing it up.
And having another person who you value and trust to talk about it.
And I wish we could do more stuff like this at the TLI. I appreciate so much your individual conferences with us, because I know I've had several over the years where I came in frantic, to the table and ask you questions. You're so patient. But
Did I actually give you any good answers? That's what I'm always worried about.
Yes, of course you. Yes.
Good answer, Amy. All right, now. No, I'm glad. Very good. Yeah.
The total score one.
Yeah.
We discovered that through a conference with you, and I'm really trying to figure out what that meant. Right.
Where does the total score fit? We had no idea how to even understand that.
Right.
And I think that was in Vancouver. And then you pointed us to Jerry's article that he wrote, I think.
That explained it.
In JR.
Yeah, he had a couple articles that I've been, on the last couple I Love Data Fridays, I've been using, which I think are great little articles that give some insight about the score. And, he goes into how he computed it. But I mean, I think, it's a very handy little score Amy, I'm totally going to steal your thing. It's a good score to use in addition to the other information and scores that are available.
Because we kept asking questions and trying to pull other data that either supported or, did not support our assertions about the data and helped us understand it.
And it helped us move from what we thought was simple to something that's very complex. So,
and I think it was hard because with some of those, especially the ones with ceiling effects, you sort of start going, what am I supposed to do with this data? How am I supposed to understand what this kid really looks like? And the total score, for us at least, gave us a way of sort of talking about all the data collectively and looking at the child in a different way. And I really do, I'm anxious to see what you do with that based upon some of the things you showed us in Carnegie. New analyses of total score. I've already come back and looked at all of ours from last year, by the way.
Good.
So I do hope, a shout out to all other teacher leaders. I do think everybody is out there doing stuff like this, better than this. I want us to find a way to share it more comprehensively. And I know, shout out to Christy Flint in Georgia. She had a random conversation with me on an airport shuttle 2 weeks ago, which spurred my thinking and made me come straight back and do something completely different for OPL in terms of the circle discussion. It was the greatest thing ever. So it was so refreshing. I just hope that this turns into something where teacher leaders have a more a better way of sharing things, talking about what they're doing.
No, this is great. So, wow, anything else or?
Good Lord, Jeff, what else can we add?
No, I don't want to stop it, but I mean, I'm trying to be very nice. I don't want to be like, what else do you got? This is, no.
Yeah.
Or do we need to wrap it up and are we good?
Probably, my gosh, we've talked about, I don't have any.
Have anything else either.
I mean, we'll let you know in Greenville, believe me, we are coming to the table together in Greenville.
Arm in arm.
We should do that, right? You know, so. All right. Are you done with us? Is that good? Is there anything else?
No, I think this is good. I mean, I think the only thing I'll add in is maybe just we'll try to summarize everything here in a minute or so. I mean, I don't think it's possible, but you guys have actually already said it. It is that, I mean, what you really demonstrated here is that, and I'm related to discussions at my table, is that a lot of times I get people coming to the table about what is the simple fix, what is the simple pointer to the problem. The data from multiple places seem to hint or allude or point to potential problems, but it may not actually reveal the exact natures of the problems. And it's through your discussions together over time, and not just in one sitting, but over time, on the orders of months, weeks, months, and even now going on years, that you guys are seeing that the problems for you guys are not, they're not simple. They aren't these black and white sort of things. They're complex things that you have to almost at times work on with your teachers individually, which your weekly reports or daily reports forms help you see and identify. And it's this continuous discussion, this continuous look at data that have helped you figure out. And then, you sort of at times are trying, you want your teachers to buy into this. Like, it's one thing, it's hard to come down from the mountain and say, we're going to do this without getting some buy-in. So, in the beginning of the slides, you were showing how, the lines in 5.1 are coming closer together. We are making that progress, and we are getting there, and this is how we are doing it and everything. So, and that finally that it's, you two alone would have probably had a very difficult time doing this by yourselves, but it's your work together is what it's made it possible. I mean, Amy kind of says, Beth, that you're the data brains behind all of this, and the Google Docs brains behind everything. So
listen, I could not do any of this technology stuff. She is the one she's the more organized of the two of us. Question. And so she's the driver and I'm just the passenger, like, hey,
the formatter.
Can we turn off here? Can we turn off here and see this now, Beth? And
otherwise all of our PowerPoints would be black and yellow and everything would
it is
17 different fonts.
It is a beautiful, I don't care about that stuff. It is a beautiful gift to have someone that like you are compatible with, but also has strengths you don't have. And I think our friendship and our relationship and our work together exemplifies that. But also, we are not scared to ask any question of what each other, like, we don't preface things with, this may be stupid. We don't do that with each other, because it's like, you have to feel free to ask anything when you're in a situation with data like this, because you never know what you haven't thought of yet. And I think we've empowered our teachers this year. Maybe this is where the growth is. We have given them a role in this analysis and understanding and growth toward the solution that is central. It is not passive. They are part of the solution. And by bringing them back in, and we're honoring their data, we're listening to them, and that reflective piece is so important. We're honoring their voice. They don't work for us. We work for them. And if we don't get a response from them that we think is the learning goal, we don't blame them. We say, what did we fail to do this time? And I think that's a really important mindset for teacher leaders to have. That can be hard. It's much easier to go, oh, well, they just weren't listening. They didn't read closely.
it's easier to blame them.
Yeah.
But it's really on our lap.
Mhm. So, I mean, I think it's a mindset as a team, and I think the teacher leaders that we work with in Kentucky, that's very much the mindset. So their involvement in this process cannot be understated. I think that's really important. You know, but
Excellent.
we do want it, but I still, would be remiss if I didn't say that all this work involves Jeff Williams, Leslie McBain, Meg Vermolo, all of the McGee Free Study, the work, the articles from Texas Women's University. I know Leslie and Jeff both have been lovely about answering emails and text messages to help us think. So it's like it really shows you the power and what good work you can do when you have lots of voices and things in the mix. So
Good.
Figure it out how to do that.
All right. Well, I think this is where we'll kind of cut it off then. I think it's a good ending spot. So, Amy, Beth, I'm going to say thank you for sharing all this on how do you do data here on I Love Data Fridays. Keep me up to date on all the wonderful things that are going on and all of the ways that you're using your data. And I think, Amy, I know you keep talking to me about what I should do at TLI for this data thing. So I think January, I'm going to actually write down what you suggest. I keep nodding my head. Yes, I'm going to write that down, but I'm actually going to write it down and
Okay.
put some planning and thought to it. So,
I'll be following up with you on that. Chasing you on stage if I don't see evidence of that in your talk.
I know, blowing up my phone. So, all right.
Okay. Have a great week, Jeff. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy birthday.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you. All right. You too, Amy. Happy birthday. Thanks, Beth. Talk to you guys later.
Bye.
Bye. All right. Well, I sure hoped you enjoyed this first installment of How Do You Do Data? Hey, if you're a teacher leader and you're using data and you want to share how you use it, send me an email over at brimerj@idecweb.us, and maybe we could get you on I Love Data Fridays as well. All right, folks, I'm going to cue the music here. I want to say thank you once again for listening to this episode of I Love the Data Fridays, and I sure hope you enjoyed listening to how you do data. Hopefully we'll get some more teacher leaders on there. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the holiday weekend, be safe, and as always, we will talk data to you later.